90 Day Fiancé's Jasmine revealed her pregnancy to Gino on Happily Ever After, and it was absolutely more brutal than I expected. Warning, the following contains spoilers for the 90 Day Fiancé Happily Ever After episode, Nobody Puts Baby in a Corner. Stream it with an HBO Max subscription and read at your own risk. Knowing ahead of the season that Gino Palazzolo and Jasmine Pineda would ultimately end their marriage certainly softened the emotional impact of watching it unravel week after week on 90 Day Fiancé Happily Ever After. Longtime viewers had already been bracing themselves for the inevitable collapse of one of the franchise's most explosive and emotionally volatile couples. Their relationship has always been defined by extreme highs and devastating lows. And by the time this season began, many fans suspected the ending would not be a happy one. Because of that knowledge, I went into this season feeling relatively prepared. I expected arguments. I expected tears. I even expected moments of outright cruelty. I was mentally ready for Gino's brief and awkward fling with Natalie, and I was not shocked when that situation exploded into yet another dramatic confrontation between Natalie and Jasmine. Those moments felt chaotic, yes, but still familiar territory for 90 Day Fiancé. What I was not prepared for, however, was Jasmine's pregnancy reveal to Gino. That scene hit with a level of emotional brutality that felt fundamentally different from anything else this franchise has delivered in recent years. It wasn't just uncomfortable. It wasn't just dramatic. It was raw, quiet, deeply personal heartbreak, unfolding in a way that felt almost too real for reality television. When viewers first learned Jasmine was pregnant, 90 Day Fiancé viewers officially learned Jasmine was pregnant long before this episode aired, when she walked onto the stage during the Last Resort Season 2 tell-all, visibly pregnant and unapologetically confident. At that point, the news felt shocking but oddly detached. Jasmine appeared composed, even smug at times, standing beside her new partner Matt Brannisteraniu. She spoke with confidence, projecting the image of a woman who had moved on, rebuilt her life, and found happiness after the wreckage of her marriage to Gino. In that moment, many fans assumed the transition had been smooth. The body language suggested certainty. The words suggested empowerment. It looked like Jasmine had closed the chapter on Gino completely. But Happily Ever After offered something very different. The latest episode peeled back the polished exterior we saw at the tell-all and revealed the emotional chaos that existed when the pregnancy first became real. Suddenly, Jasmine wasn't confident, she wasn't smug, she wasn't in control. She was terrified, conflicted, and emotionally overwhelmed. And that contrast is what made the scene so devastating. Jasmine made a brutal reveal about Gino. Jasmine invited Gino to Matt's house, a setting that already carried heavy emotional symbolism. It wasn't neutral ground, it wasn't private, it was a physical reminder that Jasmine had moved on, at least in practical terms. From the moment Gino arrived, the tension was thick, and Jasmine's body language made it clear she was struggling to hold herself together. Initially, the conversation focused on Jasmine's plans to move to Florida, which in itself was a painful revelation. Florida represented finality, distance, a clean break from the life she once tried to build with Gino. But that wasn't the real reason she called him there. Then came the truth. Jasmine told Gino she was pregnant. She explained that she wanted him to hear it directly from her, before he read it in tabloids, before other cast members told him, before it became public knowledge during the Last Resort tell-all. That detail mattered. It showed that despite everything that had happened between them, Jasmine still felt some sense of responsibility toward him, or maybe guilt, or maybe both. Gino's reaction was quiet. He congratulated her. He spoke calmly. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't lash out, he didn't say anything cruel. And that was exactly what terrified Jasmine. As Gino walked out the door, Jasmine completely unraveled. She began crying uncontrollably, watching him drive away through the window. She explained through sobs that this was the worst reaction she could have received. Not because he was angry, but because he wasn't. She knew Gino well enough to understand that when he appears calm in moments like this, it means the real emotional explosion will happen later, in private. His silence wasn't peace. It was devastation being swallowed whole. That realization crushed her. The silence was louder than any argument. What made this moment so painful to watch was how restrained it was. There was no screaming match, no insults, no dramatic music cues pushing the audience to feel a certain way. Just two people sitting in the wreckage of a relationship that had once promised everything and delivered nothing but pain. Jasmine wasn't celebrating her pregnancy in this moment. She wasn't glowing, she wasn't joyful. She was confronting the reality that her happiness came at the cost of someone else's lifelong dream. And Gino, meanwhile, walked away without saying what he truly felt, because he couldn't. Gino breaking down in his confessional broke my heart. As someone who has watched 90 Day Fiancé for years, I'll be honest, I have not always had sympathy for Gino Palazzolo. Throughout his relationship with Jasmine, he made choices that fueled her jealousy and insecurity. He sent intimate photos of her to his ex. He crossed boundaries she explicitly asked him not to cross. He held a bachelor party despite knowing how deeply that would hurt her. Time and again, he poked at her emotional wounds and then acted surprised when she reacted explosively. For a long time, it felt like Gino was partially responsible for the chaos he endured. But something changed after they got married. Once they were officially husband and wife, Gino seemed genuinely committed to starting fresh. He talked openly about wanting children. He expressed hope about building a real family with Jasmine. For him, marriage wasn't just companionship. It was the last chance to become a father, something he had clearly wanted for years. Then, slowly, everything fell apart. They stopped being intimate, emotional distance replaced affection, and then Matt entered the picture. Watching Gino in his confessional, finally breaking down, finally admitting that he felt like his entire relationship had been a lie, was devastating. This wasn't a man angry at his ex. This was a man mourning a future that would never exist. When Jasmine admitted she knew the pregnancy news broke Gino's heart because he had hoped their marriage would give him a child of his own, the pain became unbearable. That wasn't just heartbreak. That was grief. A different kind of reality TV pain. What made this storyline so unexpectedly powerful is that it wasn't built on spectacle. It was built on emotional truth. There were no villains in this moment, no winners, just loss. Jasmine wasn't wrong for moving on. Gino wasn't wrong for wanting a family. Matt wasn't wrong for being part of Jasmine's future. But the timing, the circumstances, and the emotional fallout made everything feel cruel anyway. I genuinely did not expect to feel emotional watching this unfold. This franchise has numbed viewers with years of over-the-top drama, but this moment cut through all of that. I'll admit it, I got misty-eyed sitting on the couch, and I never expected this storyline to be the one that did it. Final thoughts. Jasmine's pregnancy reveal to Gino wasn't just another dramatic plot point. It was one of the most emotionally brutal scenes 90 Day Fiancé has ever aired, precisely because of how quiet and real it was. It reminded viewers that behind the fights, behind the memes, behind the outrageous behavior, there are real people dealing with irreversible life changes. This wasn't entertainment. It was heartbreak. And it's going to linger with fans long after the season ends. 90 Day Fiancé Happily Ever After. Jasmine's pregnancy reveal to Gino was far more devastating than anyone expected. Warning: the following article contains spoilers from the 90 Day Fiancé Happily Ever After episode titled Nobody Puts Baby in a Corner. Viewers who haven't watched should proceed with caution. The episode is currently streaming on HBO Max. Going into this season of 90 Day Fiancé Happily Ever After, many fans already knew how the story between Gino Palazzolo and Jasmine Pineda would end. Their marriage was never going to survive, and that knowledge softened the blow of watching their relationship slowly collapse on screen. For longtime viewers, this couple has always represented chaos, intense passion followed by equally intense destruction. From the very beginning, their love story was fueled by extreme emotions, explosive fights, and unresolved trust issues. By the time the season began, most fans had already prepared themselves for heartbreak. The warning signs were everywhere. Because of that, I thought I was emotionally ready. I expected shouting matches. I expected tears. I even expected moments that crossed the line into cruelty. I braced myself for Gino's uncomfortable and short-lived connection with Natalie, and I wasn't surprised when that situation spiraled into yet another confrontation involving Jasmine. Those moments were messy, dramatic, and exhausting, but also very familiar for this franchise. What I was not prepared for was the moment Jasmine revealed her pregnancy to Gino. That scene landed with a level of emotional intensity that felt completely different from the usual reality TV drama. It wasn't loud, it wasn't sensational. Instead, it was painfully quiet, deeply intimate, and almost unbearably real. It felt less like entertainment and more like watching two people experience genuine heartbreak in real time. When fans first discovered Jasmine was pregnant, viewers technically learned about Jasmine's pregnancy well before this episode aired. During the Last Resort Season 2 tell-all, Jasmine appeared on stage visibly pregnant, standing confidently beside her new partner, Matt Branister-on-You. At the time, the reveal felt shocking, but oddly distant. Jasmine seemed composed, self-assured, and even a bit defiant. She spoke with certainty, projecting the image of someone who had completely moved on from her past. In that moment, it was easy to assume that everything had fallen into place for her. Her posture suggested confidence, her tone suggested closure. It looked like she had firmly shut the door on her marriage to Gino and stepped into a new chapter without hesitation. But Happily Ever After told a very different story. This episode stripped away that polished version of events and showed what actually happened when the pregnancy news first surfaced. The confident woman fans saw at the tell-all was nowhere to be found. Instead, Jasmine appeared emotionally shaken, uncertain, and overwhelmed. She wasn't celebrating, she was spiraling. That stark contrast made the scene hit even harder. Jasmine's painful confession to Gino. Jasmine chose to invite Gino to Matt's home, a decision that carried heavy emotional weight. This was not a neutral or comfortable space. It symbolized her new life, one that no longer included her husband. From the second Gino arrived, the tension was undeniable. Jasmine looked like someone bracing herself for impact, barely holding her emotions together. At first, she talked about her plans to relocate to Florida, a revelation that already felt like a final goodbye. Florida represented distance, permanence, and the complete dismantling of the future she and Gino once discussed. But that wasn't the true reason she asked him to come. Then she said it. She told Gino she was pregnant. Jasmine explained that she wanted him to hear the news directly from her, rather than finding out through gossip, media headlines, or other cast members. She wanted to tell him before the information became public during the Last Resort tell-all. That choice spoke volumes. Despite everything that had gone wrong between them, she still felt a sense of obligation, or perhaps guilt, toward him. Gino's response was subdued. He congratulated her quietly. He remains calm. He didn't yell, accuse, or react dramatically. And that calm response shattered Jasmine. As Gino left the house, Jasmine broke down completely. She watched him drive away sobbing as she explained that his reaction was the worst possible outcome. Not because he was angry, but because he wasn't. She knew him well enough to recognize that his silence meant something far more painful was happening internally. His composure wasn't acceptance. It was heartbreak he couldn't express out loud. When silence hurts more than words. What made this moment so devastating was its restraint. There was no explosive argument, no insults flying back and forth, no dramatic editing to heighten the tension. Just two people facing the ruins of a marriage that once carried real hope. Jasmine wasn't glowing with happiness. She wasn't celebrating new life. She was confronting the reality that her new beginning had destroyed someone else's lifelong dream. And Gino, unable to articulate his pain, chose silence over confrontation. That silence said everything. Gino's confessional was absolutely heartbreaking. As a longtime viewer, I'll admit that I haven't always felt sympathy for Gino. Over the years, he made decisions that clearly worsened Jasmine's insecurities. He violated her trust by sharing her private photos with his ex. He ignored boundaries she explicitly set. He repeatedly underestimated how deeply his actions affected her emotional stability. For a long time, it felt like Gino played a role in the chaos he experienced. But after they married, something shifted. Gino seemed genuinely hopeful. He talked openly about wanting children. He spoke about building a future together. For him, this marriage wasn't just companionship. It was his chance to finally become a father, something he clearly longed for. Then, everything unraveled. Their intimacy disappeared, emotional closeness faded, and eventually, Matt entered the picture. Watching Gino finally break down in his confessional, admitting that he felt like his entire relationship had been a lie, was devastating. This wasn't anger. This was mourning. He wasn't losing Jasmine anymore. He was losing the future he believed they were building together. When Jasmine admitted she knew the pregnancy news shattered him because he had hoped to have a child with her, the pain became overwhelming. That wasn't simple heartbreak. That was deep, lasting grief. A rare moment of realness in reality TV. What made this storyline so powerful was its authenticity. There were no clear villains, no winners, just people hurting. Jasmine wasn't wrong for moving on. Gino wasn't wrong for wanting a family. Matt wasn't wrong for being part of her future. But the timing, the circumstances, and the emotional consequences made everything feel cruel anyway. I genuinely didn't expect to feel emotional watching this unfold. After years of dramatic exaggeration, this quiet moment cut straight through the noise. I'll admit it, I got emotional watching it, and I never thought this storyline would be the one to do that. Final thoughts. 90 Day Fiancé's Jasmine revealed her pregnancy to Gino on Happily Ever After, and it was absolutely more brutal than I expected. Warning, the following contains spoilers for the 90 Day Fiancé Happily Ever After episode, Nobody Puts Baby in a Corner. Stream it with an HBO Max subscription and read at your own risk. Knowing ahead of the season that Gino Palazzolo and Jasmine Pineda would end their marriage certainly lessened the blow of watching it unfold on 90 Day Fiancé Happily Ever After. I was prepared for Gino's temporary fling with Natalie and even the fight that went down between her and Jasmine. What I wasn't prepared for was her pregnancy reveal scene to Gino, which was way harder to watch than I expected. 90 Day Fiancé viewers first officially learned Jasmine was pregnant when she walked out on stage during the Last Resort Season 2 tell-all, looking pretty far along. She was confident and somewhat cocky about her new relationship with Matt Brannistoranu, but the latest scene in HEA showed she was far less confident about it all when it happened. Jasmine made a brutal reveal about Gino. Jasmine invited Gino to Matt's house to reveal she was moving to Florida, but that wasn't all. After I speculated that Jasmine knew she was pregnant with Matt's child the previous week, she told Gino that she was expecting and wanted to let him know before he found out from tabloids, other cast members, or ahead of the tell-all for The Last Resort. Gino congratulated her, and after a little bit of talking, went out the door. It seemed like a normal response, but Jasmine knew better. She began to cry and watched him pull away out the window, explaining that was the worst reaction she could have gotten. She knew that when Gino was at his calmest in the face of news like that, it only meant he would have a more extreme reaction when he was in private. Gino breaking down in his confessional broke my heart. I'll admit that as a longtime 90 Day Fiancé fan, I haven't had a ton of sympathy for Gino throughout his journey with Jasmine. He knew she was a jealous person throughout their relationship, yet he continued to push the envelope by sending pics of her to his ex and by having a bachelor party despite her specific instructions not to. All that said, once they were officially married, it seemed as though Gino had put his past behind them and was ready to start a family with Jasmine. They announced their intention to start trying for children shortly after their marriage, but months later they were no longer sleeping together, and her situation with Matt began. To see Gino cry and finally admit for the first time that he felt his whole relationship was a lie was brutal. It got even worse when Jasmine admitted she knew the news broke Gino's heart because he hoped with their marriage he'd finally have a child of his own. I'll admit I got a little misty-eyed on the couch watching it all unfold, which I certainly didn't expect to happen with this storyline at all.